is now November 1st, and about 2 weeks ago, on October 16th of 1859, John Brown had sparked a massive slave rebellion on Harpers Ferry, Virginia. John Brown is a staunch abolitionist, and since last year of 1858, he had been planning this attack. Born in Connecticut in 1800 and raised in Ohio, Brown came from an anti-slavery family. He spent much of his life working at a variety of businesses. He declared bankruptcy at age 42 and had more than 20 lawsuits filed against him. In 1837, his life changed irrevocably when he attended an abolition meeting in Cleveland, during which he was so moved that he publicly announced his dedication to destroying the institution of slavery. As early as 1848, he was formulating a plan to incite an insurrection. In the 1850s, Brown traveled to Kansas with 5 of his sons to fight against the pro-slavery forces in the contest over that territory. On May 21, 1856, pro-slavery men raided the abolitionist town of Lawrence, and Brown personally sought revenge. In the North, John Brown became a true hero, but in the South, many have considered the event as a terrorist attack and are angry about the support for John Brown, and that the Northerners have financed this raid. Many Southerners are now convinced that Northerners will fund and support other raids. The South has also falsely blamed Abraham Lincoln of supporting Brown's intentions as well as the Republican Party. The South is now strengthening the militia, successfully recruiting militia companies, seeming to prepare for future revenge in the North. This event has definitely divided the North and South further. It is said Mr. Brown had a 22-man army and was spotted by a local militia headed by Colonel Lee from the South. Today, we will speak to both Colonel Lee and Mr. Brown about their insights on the rebellion. Pleasure to have you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, ma'am.
What were your intentions for this rebellion?
In the first place, I deny everything but what I have all along admitted. The design on my part was to free slaves. I intended certainly to make a clean thing of the matter, as I did last winter when I went into Missouri and took slaves without the snapping of a gun on either side, moved them through the country, and finally left them in Canada. I designed to do the same thing again on a larger scale. That was all I intended. I never did intend murder or treason or the destruction of property or to excite or incite slaves to rebel or to make insurrection.
I see. And what truly came out of this rebellion?
On October 16th, my army and I set out for Harpers Ferry. I had 21 men, 5 Negroes, some of which had enslaved relatives, and 16 white, 2 of which were my sons. We walked all night in the heavy rain and reached town at 4 in the morning. I cut telegraph wires and made my assault. I captured the Federal Armory and Arsenal. I captured a weapons supplier to the government. I rounded up 60 citizens and held them hostage, simply hoping for the slaves to join the fight for their own freedom. And sadly, no slaves came. Later, the local militia discovered us. My son was killed in his efforts to negotiate with the citizens, and before we knew, the word of insurrection had reached President Buchanan. Most of our army had passed away. I was barely wounded, and when I awoke, I knew that my efforts had failed completely, and execution was my only route. It is unjust that I should suffer as a penalty. This is a reward, not a punishment.
I'm sorry, sir. What was your original plan for this rebellion?
I knew in 1858 I was ready to launch war. I had an adequate army and enough money readily available. I was indeed very eager. I had a plan to establish a base in the Blue Ridge Mountains and assist runaway slaves. Although I was eager and ready, one of my followers threatened to reveal my plan, and he followed through with it. I went into hiding to avoid any conflict. In the summer of 1859, I was very eager and rented a farm across the Potomac River from Harpers Ferry. There I assembled arms and waited for my army to arrive, but in my time of hiding, many men changed their minds about the rebellion and moved away. Worried about the consequences and weighing the chances of this rebellion's success, even Henry Highland did not believe me. I talked to Frederick Douglass in August and told him my plans of seizing the Federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry instead of staging guerrilla warfare from the mountains. He simply told me that attacking the arsenal was like attacking the federal government, and was a grave mistake. I remember exactly. He told me, "You're walking into a perfect steel trap. You'll never get out alive." It scared me that my dear friend would say something like this.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Brown. I appreciate your response. We will now turn to Colonel Robert E. Lee from the South. Hello, Mr. Lee.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Mr. Brown has a very interesting story behind his imprisonment. I'm curious as to what happened for you.
The result proves that this plan was the attempt of a fanatic madman who could only end in failure, and its temporary success was owing to the panic and confusion he succeeded in creating by magnifying his numbers. This is what I know, and this is what I know is true.
What leads you to make this assumption?
My object was, with a view of saving our citizens, to have as short an interval as possible between the summons and attack. The summons, as I had anticipated, was rejected. At the concerted signal, the storming party moved quickly to the door and commenced the attack. John Brown avows that his object was the liberation of the slaves of Virginia and of the whole South, and acknowledges that he has been disappointed in his expectations of aid from the black as well as white population, both in the southern and the northern states. The blacks, whom he forced from their homes in his neighborhood, as far as I could learn, gave him no voluntary assistance. It is truly insane that Mr. Brown would put others' life on the line for a few slave freedom.
Thank you for your input.
I hope you will consider